Christ. Otito dịrị Jesu. I am very glad to be here. Sir, I salute you. You'll be surprised to learn that I've not been here since this university was established. And I'm also surprised to discover that it is only 10 years old, because your reputation is larger than 10 years. And I like what I'm seeing here. You have just been told that I'm chairman of council and pro-chancellor to 2 universities. One is State University, Esut. The other, the Catholic University, Veritas in Abuja. But I like what I'm seeing here. Because one who steps in here breathes some serenity in the midst of the chaos that our society has become. And this is a reason for hope and a source of encouragement. I regret the time that was taken up in the so-called presentation. I told Sir not to present it, but he insisted. And I understand also somehow, because of the context of the celebration, it's a university environment. And so all those things can be said in order to inspire all scholars here and those who help them. I'm glad to be here because I'm associated to this university in very many ways. Of course, GO University could easily become Godfrey Onah University. A personal relationship existed between me and our late Bishop Godfrey Okoye, whose namesake I am. I won't go into the details of that relationship. And I also say with gratitude that a personal friendly relationship has existed between me and Father Ike Chukwuani, between Father Ike Chukwuani and me, since our days in the seminary. And that relationship was there even before he himself entered the seminary. Because at some point I became also somehow a member of their family. And I'm glad to discover here my revered inspirator and the encourager, Father Edward Carnival. His gray hairs did not start now. I had always known him with gray hairs. And I knew him more than 40 years ago. And he had gray hairs then already. I was pleased to find him here. And besides, many of the people on your staff, teaching staff, were my students. Here in Nigeria and over in Rome. Some of your students are my blood relations, but all of you are my children. So that is what makes it for me a joy to be here and to tell you that I share in the glories and the joys of what you are doing here and what you have been doing in the past 10 years. I believe you don't even understand the enormity of the responsibility you bear in a place. I was saying that I believe you don't even realize the enormity of the responsibility you bear by being here, either as student or staff, whether teaching or non-teaching staff. Our society in Nigeria is in trouble. And anybody who wants to be realistic can only say that the future is not bright. In spite of all optimism, if we want to be honest with ourselves, we have a lot of problems to contend with. But those problems are not without solutions. And that is why I'm talking about the enormity of the responsibility you bear. What has now come to be known as university has a long history. The tradition of God gathering young people for training in order to be able to turn them into the society, to influence that society positively, is a very ancient tradition that goes back to the temples of the Egyptian priests, several centuries and millennia before Christ. The priests of the complex and complicated religion of Egypt had the responsibility of educating young people and preparing them for leadership in the society. That responsibility and that tradition was borrowed by several other cultures and traditions after the Egyptian civilization collapsed. And one of the most remarkable that continued that tradition was the Greek tradition in the time of Plato. You will all know that the Greek philosopher Plato founded an academy in 386 before Christ. That academy of Plato can be regarded as the source of modern Western universities and everything that follows that tradition. But the Academy of Plato was not founded in order to prepare young people so that they will be able to get jobs when they left the academy. Plato was fundamentally interested in the society he was living in. First, he joined a political group of the aristocrats who believed that democracy was just folly, because it was a government where everybody had a say, even those who did not understand anything about governance. And I think I agree with them. Abraham Lincoln has led us to describe this democracy as the government of the people, by the people, for the people. Today, not only in Nigeria, but everywhere in the world, what we call democracy is the manipulation of the poor by the powerful for the rich. Plato and his group did not find anything good in democracy. But he was disappointed at the corruption of the aristocrats. And he joined the Democrats. The Democrats further disappointed him because they couldn't stand the truth and killed his master, Socrates. He gave up on the Greek society. But rather than abandon the Greek society to his fate, he used the only money he had saved. Plato was not a rich man. He once said a prayer. He said that as an intellectual, he was not supposed to have enough, much money. Present day professors, think about that. I'm not talking about Godfrey Okoye professors. I will be surprised if your salaries are able to keep you for the month from this university. But we know what Nigerian professors now earn. But Plato prayed to the gods to give him only so much gold that an honest man would be able to carry in his pocket. He had very little money, but a friend of his had made a donation to him, and he used the only money he had to buy a plot of land on which he established that academy for training young Greek men and women who by association would be prepared to think freely and critically to be able to change the sorts of the Greek society. The greatest problem of modern society, especially in Nigeria, is that we're no longer thinking. And if we're thinking, we're not thinking critically. And nowhere does this manifest itself as clearly as it does in politics and in religion. Catholic priests know that Christianity is a very, very rational religion. Rational because it has principles. And once you accept these principles by faith, so many conclusions follow by pure logic. And that is what theology all does. Trying to follow the logic to explain the basic the principles of faith of Christianity. All that has been jettisoned today, especially in Nigeria, in preference to a religion that is not based on any rationality. A religion that is not fit for human beings. A religion that makes you believe that your well-being depends on how much you give to the pastor. A religion that makes you believe that your salvation depends on an individual man of God, they call themselves, and not on your personal relationship with God, yes, mediated by your church. But that is for another day. In politics, if there was any thought about, any critical thinking about politics in Nigeria, for instance, we will not tolerate the fact that during elections we don't have people's names on the ballot papers. We have party names. And we vote for parties. And parties select those who represent them when the parties win the election. And the particular politician wins an election on the ticket of a party, gets into the legislative house and changes his party, but retains his seat. Stupidity. Incoherence, lack of thought. And Nigerians are applauding because we are not thinking. If we were thinking, how could we ever think that men who arbitrarily interrupted our democratic process through successive military coups and then traced a culture of impunity and violence in this country, men like Obasanjo, men like Muhammadu Buhari, that such men could ever be part of the contribution to the search for the solution. They can't. They are part of our problem. But Nigerians are not thinking. And that is why any of them who claims to be a Democrat, and above all one who fights corruption, will immediately be applauded as a savior. Now, and we are wondering why we are where we are. We are not thinking. This thoughtlessness is also applied to our relationship with life and consumerism. Most of us here, even the poorest among you, possess 10 times more than they ever need. In clothes, gadgets, and what have you. But we have been made to believe that without those things we are nobodies. Our women have been made to believe, for instance, that if they don't wear hair attachments from Brazil and India, they haven't arrived yet. Thinking. Plato built the academy
to train people to think for themselves, to think critically, as to be able to ask questions and seek for solutions. Eventually, what survived of Plato's Academy after the destruction of Athens in 88 BC was destroyed by a dictator, Emperor Justinian. You know, dictators are always afraid of universities. For your information, all the ASU strikes are engineered and manipulated by those who are afraid of your being educated. Don't mind all those things they are telling you. It is in order to improve the quality of education in this country, and we improve the quality of education only close to election. When they want to pressurize the politicians to give them more money, and by the time they collect more money, they tell you we are back to the negotiating table. Dictators are afraid of universities. And even now, our dictators are afraid of universities. They destroy university education system and even the public education system and pretend to be contributing to education by establishing private ones. And that is why a university like ours, Go University, and others like this are seen only as means of making money, and they will do everything to make sure that universities like ours will not prosper, but they will. So I am telling you, the enormity of the responsibility you bear is that you are not being trained here in order that when you get out there, you get a job. You know better than I do now that getting a job in Nigeria is not about what certificates you have, but about whom you know, and who knows who knows who. So if the only thing you are aspiring to get is a job, you may know that the money being invested in training you is being wasted. You are rather being trained to make a difference. And what trains you to make a difference? What trains you to make a difference is that you are being cultivated to become repositories of values. Repositories of values. And by value I mean that which makes a thing to be desirable or good. And this is what the church does in establishing universities. And the church has always done that since the 12th century. I always tell people that when the Universitas Scholarium and the Universitas Magistrorum in Paris and in I think in Madrid, when they were established, they were an association of free thinkers, of teachers and scholars, students, under the guardianship of popes and bishops, so that people would be able to, guided by the principle of truth, God himself, research about particular truths concerning the human being, the world, and our relationship with God. The time that the word university entered into common vocabulary of the Western mind, there was no need to add the qualification Catholic to that, because that was centuries before Martin Luther or Henry VIII was born. Many of the things now you have in universities like cathedra, chair, professor who professes faith, masters, licencia, docendi, those things were even provosts, rectors, chancellors and vice chancellors. Those are ecclesiastical juridical terms, because that determined their relationship with the church authority, without which you couldn't claim to be disseminating the truth. the passion and vision of the church in running educational institutions is because, as is based on the fact that, as St. Augustine said, the church has no right to beget children if she can't educate them. And if the church begets children in the sacraments of matrimony and baptism, then the church has an obligation to educate those children in the truth. And the truth in which you are being educated is the source of values of human beings, values of things in the world, and values of our relationships with God and with. Now, I will summarize my insistence on your being trained for values by saying that where we have a collection of our values is what we call culture. Culture is the summary of the values of a society that makes it different from another society. And so what defines every society are the values they treasure and transmit. So I'm asking all those involved in Go University to bear in mind that until we ask ourselves what values we are internalizing and what values we are taking out to the larger society in order to be able to transform the society from within, until we are asking that question, the time we are spending here may be wasted time. This is why I said the situation in Nigeria is cause for concern. But it is not without a solution, because we have you. You must be part of that solution. It is much more than getting a job. It is much more than acquiring knowledge and acquiring skills. It is about values. The values of the Nigerian society are in crisis. Our cultures are in crisis. And they are seen everywhere. I sometimes give a few examples. The destruction of the values in our society that has been caused by what I call the Okada generation and by Nollywood. Okada and home video have done more harm. The only thing that has destroyed Nigeria more than Okada and home video is military rule. And don't mind how much they recycle these military men into our politics. They are cancerous. They can't help us. Okada has made many of you lazy. Distances we used to walk without feeling the pain, you have door-to-door services by Okada. And they have become so slow in walking. And even, not only that, you don't even want to walk anymore, some young people are not in school because they are Okada operators. They don't want to learn any skills because Okada gives them quick money. And when the quick money is not got by commercial Okada, they use the Okada for robbery. Maybe because it's no longer as widespread in Enugu as it is in the Nsukka where I am based. You may not understand my problem. But what about the confusion and chaos on our roads? And what about the accidents that they are causing? And but they give you an example of how something like Okada slowly changes our mentality. When I was growing up, no woman would allow the body of a strange man touch her if they were not without any explanation. Today, our women hug men they don't know without minding. And sometimes these hugs are deliberately provoked by the Okada riders. And sometimes our women are sandwiched between dirty, smelling men. And that is not the problem. The problem is that the women don't care. That is where the problem lies. And about home video, the worst aspects of our public and private lives have been documented in those home videos and presented as factual documentaries and historical documentaries. The weirdest truths of the imaginations of artists are now presented as Igbo religion, African religion. And we don't know that outside Nigeria, the typical African sees every Nigerian as the actors in Nollywood. People who are only looking for where to cheat others and where to use charms to harm others. A friend of mine told me the story how he visited Nigeria from Kenya. He bought some gifts and took them back to Kenya. Nobody accepted those gifts. Because from what they had seen in the Nigerian films, those things are all bewitched, and when you keep them in your house, you may yourself disappear. You know how? Nollywood created a culture in America, giving the American the image of being proud, arrogant, and pushy. Hollywood. And Nollywood is creating a very negative culture and impression and image about the Nigerian. But people like you can stop that because you can question it. You can think differently. And so it is with so many other things. By the time you get out there, all the things you may have learned as principles here will have to be applied. Even in the area of science, don't think that this battle is not being fought in the area of science. There is so much happening in the area of information technology. There is so much happening in the area of genetic engineering. There is so much happening in the area of artificial intelligence, and now the human being in some sectors of the world believe that whatever is scientifically possible is morally permissible. That is the question you have to keep asking if you want to make a difference in the society, and you just have to make that difference. I would be glad to hear any of the provocations any of you may have, so that we continue the conversation. I may have provoked you also by the things I said, but you will discover after watching Nigerians behave, and you go to Switzerland. My father, when he went to Italy, from Italy he went to Germany. At one point in Cologne, he saw an aircraft passing, standing at one point, and the train was driving to the train station, and we had just come out from the metro station. So, movement on the ground, movement on the ground, movement in the air, all at the same time. He said, these people are spirits, they are not human beings. No, they are not spirits. When you go from Enugu to Geneva, to Rome, to Frankfurt, you may think that the people who built these civilizations are superhumans. They are not. Because you find out eventually that unlike here, where your lecturer can't even talk without being interrupted by a microphone system that doesn't work, and where you cannot finish your assignment and submit because there is no light, and where you can't research on the internet because there is no network, if you move from here and you are placed within the same context as those your equals in Germany, in France, in Switzerland, like Ike Chukwane was, like Basil Okeke was, like Sister Konoba was, like how many of you, like I was, like Father Kanife was, you find out they don't see a red light. They don't even see a brake light, not to talk of superseding you. It is the context. Now you have to believe in yourselves and know that given the same context, you will make the same impact. My challenge to you is that you just can't be passive victims of the context you find yourselves in. You have to help, work, and labor to be producers of that context. You have to change the context. You have to change this context, and it is possible to change this context. The generation of products that are coming out from universities like Go University, those generations are the future hope and even the present hope of Nigeria. And it is on this note that I thank you for having given me the opportunity to share with you.